I think we have to talk a little bit about free speech. It's sort of been, we've been dancing around it, and it's an odd premise right now, I think, that we have to confront the ways that even the study of disinformation and misinformation are under attack. It's sort of a meta additional layer of problem now. And when this phenomenon that lies proliferated around the world, that they impacted people, early legislative efforts, particularly in authoritarian and autocratic-friendly countries, lean towards just wholesale criminalizing what was called mis- or disinformation. The problem, whether it's in Singapore or China or Cambodia, these are all part of the growing list of countries that have introduced bills that would regulate misinformation and really attach criminal liability in very broad ways. All of those have really been used ultimately as a pretext to target political dissidents, to target media. And so there's this very odd moment, right, that we have to recognize alongside efforts to seemingly address mis- and disinformation. Certain kinds of illiberal and bigoted leaders use that to cling to their own way of cherry-picking speech. And in the same breath, I'll say in the United States, I've observed that there are other now authoritarian-friendly efforts to distort the harms of disinformation and its victims. You know, academics, those who study disinformation, have come under attack. We've seen that there's a growing call to root out mis- and disinformation studies writ large. And that ultimately platforms themselves say, this is really a democracy problem. It's not us. The public square is just opened up. And so it's created this very compelling counter-narrative that disinformation is a pretext to violate people's free speech rights. Alexandra, I know you and I spoke a little bit before, and so I want to start with you. Again, I realize I've started with you a couple times, but you've had a lot of thoughts on this, and sort of how are we grappling with what free speech means? How are we protecting free speech on the one hand, accelerating what is a pro-expression environment, while holding those accountable who are malign, who exist to profit off of and proliferate some of the worst content, and with horrible effect across the country and across the globe.
Yeah. I think this is one of the points where we really haven't understood how the far right has taken freedom of speech, which is, it's a progressive, it's a democratic concept, you know, it's bedrock of democracy, and have taken it and used it against the ones fighting for democratic societies. And I think we didn't take it seriously because it seems so absurd, and it still seems so absurd to me that right now the government that is persecuting academics, journalists, everybody, is still saying, well, Europe has an issue with freedom of speech. It's just absurd. I think there's the 3 points I would like to make. First of all, I think in the US, there is a different interpretation of freedom of speech than in Europe. Because the court in the US sanctioned that an algorithm used by a digital platform is covered by freedom of speech. So it's not about the freedom of speech of the individual, but of the person controlling that platform. So it's protecting Elon Musk's freedom of speech and the Mark Zuckerberg's freedom of speech, and it's protecting their freedom to decide what we see. So this is actually violating our freedom of information. And in the European concept of freedom of speech, you don't have that. It's not protecting the freedom of a company to limit what kind of information you have access to. And I think that is very important in the discussion. When Europeans and Americans speak to each other, they often don't know this, that it's really a different thing. And in Europe, we can still use the freedom of speech concept to say, well, this is the fact that Elon Musk on X chooses what German voters see during the German elections. 40% only far-right content. The second most boosted account that German voters saw was Alex Jones in English. You know, this is not what people choose. This is what Elon Musk chooses. The first one was Elon Musk himself, obviously. This is not what Germans chose. This is a very clear breach of the freedom of being informed of German voters. So this concept that freedom of speech is also the freedom to have access to information. You know, in Germany, we care a lot about media pluralism. I think this is really important, and we really have to reconquer this concept.